The analysts at Meristem Research believe investors' sentiments in the Nigerian Exchange will improve despite improved liquidity levels at the fixed income market. Well, they expect the mixed sentiments to persist with pockets of buying interest in fundamentally strong stocks. Victory George, lead equities desk at Meristem Research, joins me for this discussion. Victory, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Esther.
Joining us today. It's been a bit of lackluster trading a week for investors, but we did see some earnings reports come filter into the market. Let's start there with the earnings. Which names come to mind for you that you think that investors really did like the reports?
Well, like you said, quite some earnings releases in the market. Well, for most of them, fell within our forecasts. Talking about your numbers now. Especially a company like NASCON, quite interesting numbers, strong revenue growth, and even higher dividend declaration, 2 naira from 1 naira that was declared last year in the previous period, and also even looking at their fourth quarter numbers, very strong improvements. We saw ROE at around 49%. So across the company's business lines, the performance was very quite impressive. Also UACN and also a Dansem, even for Dansem, well, it was quite mixed, in my opinion, for revenue drivers being more of, upticks in price, pushing it. But generally, strong top line and bottom line growth.
No, but that didn't appear to really move the market this week. I'm just trying to get into the heads of investors in terms of how they're processing these numbers and why we're not seeing that, motivation, as it were, at the market.
Yeah, investors have really been quite cautious, and it's something that we had anticipated from the beginning of the year. Sell buyers, especially on tickers that have gained substantially from the previous year, across different sectors. And for some of these tickers, investors are really much finding where they can get the most attractive price to re-enter these tickers. And we saw that play out this week. More of the sell buyers in the market did around 0.97% down as at trading yesterday. But we saw pockets of positive sentiments with the positive return we saw for Thursday's trading, which reversed the the lackluster we saw from Monday to Wednesday. Right. So we expect positive sentiments coming to the market next week. Especially seeing that some of these very good tickers are at really attractive prices now, and well, there will still be that volatility, occasional profit taking, but I'm expecting a gradual reentrant of the appreciation bias. Right,
and I know you're also keeping an eye on what's happening at the fixed income market, with liquidity levels, investors, moving, and just looking at. I'm going to have the conversation with our next guest. The OMO auctions, the Treasury bills auction. We're seeing massive, subscriptions for fixed income assets. What does that mean for the equities markets? Are you expecting that to dampen sentiment?
Well, for the fixed income space, liquidity has been quite robust compared to what we've been seeing over the last couple of periods. And we still even expect, strong liquidity to hit the market, subsequently. But the sentiment has likely been bullish. I think we've seen, since the macroeconomic data, the inflation came out, we've seen around 200 basis points decline in yield. Stronger confidence, in the markets, stronger appetite for fixed income instruments, especially at the shorter end of the curve. But for equities, this means well for equities. Declining yields in the fixed income space, could be a silver lining for equities, the equities market, and seeing that liquidity is quite robust. So we should be able to see some form of inflow as well to the equity space. So for investors, it's just where they will get the most value, and we expect, we'll just keep tabs on the market and see how this plays out in coming weeks.
What sectors outside of the banking sector now will you be keeping an eye on this year outside of the banking sector? We've seen a bit of recovery in some of the consumer names. Yeah. Nestle, not so much, but just thinking about the Q4 numbers, there were some green shoots there to take note of. But what sectors are you keeping your eye on?
Well, we'll continue to keep tabs, on some of the sectors are poised to deliver impressive performance this year as well. The oil and gas sector, of course, insurance, some of the consumer goods and industrial goods players. and also in the telecoms, MTN, as well. We expect strong recovery from them. The Q4 numbers were quite impressive. We also expect to see that play out in their Q1 numbers this year. So the Q1 numbers this year would really determine a lot for investors going forward.
I mean, what does that also say about the outlook for the operating environment this year? I mean, it would appear that investor sentiment is growing. There's more confidence now in the strength of the reforms, especially with what the monetary authorities are doing, and all of that. So, but in the operating environment, at the end of the day, there are other metrics to consider, you know, interest rates, consumer spending strength, etc. But are you bullish that, given the numbers that we saw, and companies somehow, a lot of them somehow managed to navigate that very challenging environment, that they will do the same this year?
Yeah, like we've seen pockets of recovery, especially for players in the real sector, and that have been battling with the inflationary pressure, depreciating naira. But from the macroeconomic backdrop currently, we've seen some stability, especially with the FX, lower inflation numbers. So we expect this to, you know, be some sort of a relief for these players, and we expect to see those improvements, stronger numbers, you know, for the rest of this year. So that should, on one hand, you know, bolster investor sentiments, especially to companies in the real sector.
Right. And for dividend yield, what is to be said for the dividend yield that we saw for the full year 2024 on average? And what are your expectations or outlook for this year?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I mean, we've seen some companies, you know, come out with higher dividend declarations. Like I mentioned, NASCON, you know, doing 2 naira from 1 naira in the previous period. I expect, you know, some of the banking players to also come out with impressive dividend numbers. We should translate through their dividend yields. And for some that have, you know, shared prices, that should, you know, also mean that the dividend yield would also widen in that sense. So we're still bullish, you know, for dividend seeking investors. You know, many of them have already been taking position across some of these stickers. So, I mean, it's all, you know, a positive bias in our expectation.
Okay, I love your optimism, but we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Victory, for talking to us today. Appreciate your time on the show. Victory George, lead equities desk at Meristem Research.